Let's get started with today's story. I always thought I had the perfect marriage. Grace and I had been together for 10 years, married for 8, and in all that time, she had been my best friend, my partner in crime, my everything. We shared dreams, laughs, and even our struggles. I never doubted her love for me. One afternoon, she received an envelope in the mail that immediately caught her attention. "Ben, can you believe it?" she said, waving the envelope around as if it were a winning lottery ticket. 15 years since college. It's going to be so much fun to see everyone again. I smiled at her excitement. Grace was always the social butterfly in our relationship, and it was one of the things I loved about her. "We should go together," she said, her eyes lighting up. "It'll be fun, and I'd love for you to meet some of my old friends." I hesitated for a moment. Social events weren't really my thing, but her enthusiasm was contagious. "Sure," I said. "Count me in." Her face broke into a grin, and she kissed my cheek. "You're the best, Ben. It's going to be amazing, you'll see." The night of the reunion, she was glowing. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her in all the right places. Her hair was styled, makeup flawless. She looked beautiful, radiant even. "You look stunning, Mrs. Harper," I said, pulling her in for a kiss. "And you don't look too bad yourself," she replied with a grin. The venue was a swanky hotel ballroom, the kind that screamed wealth and nostalgia. The place was packed with people who were already tipsy and reminiscing loudly. Grace introduced me to some of her old friends, most of whom were friendly enough, though a few gave me the once-over as if trying to figure out how I'd landed her. Then he appeared. "Jason," Grace said, her voice high-pitched and breathy, a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. I turned to see a tall, athletic-looking guy with perfectly tousled hair and a jawline that could cut glass. He was the kind of guy who knew he was good-looking and didn't bother hiding it. "Grace, wow, you look amazing," Jason said, his eyes lighting up as he hugged her. "This is my husband, Ben," Grace said, gesturing to me, though her tone seemed slightly off, almost nervous. "Ben, nice to meet you," Jason said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his smile charming. "Nice to meet you too," I said, though something about him immediately rubbed me the wrong way. As the evening wore on, Grace and Jason seemed to drift toward each other, caught in their own little bubble. She laughed a little too much at his jokes, touched his arm a little too often. I caught her looking at him. She wasn't just glancing at him. Her gaze lingered, as if she were seeing someone she hadn't quite forgotten. It gnawed at me, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. When we were alone for a moment, I leaned in and asked, "So, what's the story with Jason?" She blinked, her smile faltering just for a second before she waved it off. "Oh, Jason? We were just friends in college, that's all." "Just friends?" I pressed, watching her face closely. She nodded quickly, her tone light but forced. "Yeah, Ben, just friends. Don't read too much into it." I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. After all, I trusted her. But something about the way they interacted lingered in my mind, nagging at the edges of my thoughts. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was just overthinking. Grace was my wife, my best friend. There was no reason to doubt her. The day after the reunion, I started noticing subtle changes in Grace. It was like a switch had flipped overnight. She was on her phone more often, her face lighting up with smiles at texts she wouldn't share with me. She seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. The next morning over coffee, I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just the excitement of reconnecting with old friends, I told myself. "You seem chipper this morning," I said with a smile. "Oh, do I?" she replied, almost absent-mindedly, her eyes flicking to her phone again. She also started going out almost every day. "A few of my friends are staying in town for a bit longer," she said casually that evening. "We're just grabbing drinks and catching up. It's only for a week." It sounded reasonable enough. I mean, she hadn't seen these people in years. Of course, she'd want to make the most of it. Still, I couldn't ignore how vague her plans were. "Who are you meeting?" I asked one evening as she grabbed her purse. "Just a couple of the girls from college," she said, already halfway out the door. "I'll be back before too late." But as the week went on, her outing stretched later and later into the night. When I asked about it, she always had an excuse. There was just one more drink, the conversation ran long, or she lost track of time. Around that time, she also started avoiding intimacy with me. When I reached for her in bed, she'd pull away gently, mumbling, "I'm tired," or "I have a headache." At first, I thought she might really be exhausted from her busy week, but the excuses became constant. She always seemed distant, her mind elsewhere. One night, she came home late again. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to read, when she walked through the door. "Hey," I said, glancing up. "Hey," she replied, kicking off her shoes. "Sorry, I'm late." We lost track of time. As she passed by me, I caught a whiff of her. It wasn't her usual perfume. No, this was something else, a distinctly masculine cologne. My chest tightened, suspicion clawing its way to the surface. Then I noticed something else, a faint red mark near her collarbone, barely visible above the neckline of her blouse. "What's that?" I asked, gesturing toward it. She glanced down quickly, her hand flying to her neck. "Oh, this? It's nothing." "I must have scratched myself or something," she said, her voice a little too casual, a little too quick. Her explanation didn't sit right with me. "A scratch?" It didn't look like a scratch. It looked like a bruise. Something intimate. Something that shouldn't be there. The suspicion that had been gnawing at me grew sharper, more defined. Something was definitely wrong.